Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chomendo Dalson. Congratulations on making it this far. I'll be one of your panelists for today. Have a nice debate. I don't know if someone can confirm if I'm audible or not.
Yes,
Yes,
you're
you're
audible.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice round.
All right. So, hello everyone. My name is Dominic. Proud to be here. Wish you all the best in this round.
Hello everyone, I'm Joseph Moore. I'm also a panelist of this round, requesting everyone to address the panel as a whole. No preferred pronunciation. Congratulations for making till now. Best of luck for future round.
I think we're missing one panelist, but as we wait for them, is OG here? Please unmute to confirm your presence.
Yes, OG is here.
Is OO here?
In opposition is here.
Yeah.
Is CG here?
CG is here.
Is CO here?
TO here.
Prime Minister, could you read the motion for us?
All right, I'm coming. Okay, so the motion said, this house would repeal the ban of paternity DNA testing in France.
Opwip, could you read the motion for us?
This House would repeal the ban of paternity DNA testing in France.
Given that we all have the same motion, we're just waiting for Atwin. Otherwise, Prime Minister be on the ready. Congratulations for being here. Time is in the chat space. Debate rules as follows. As usual, please ask pure eyes. Yeah, best of luck and hoping for a good round. Atwin, could you introduce yourself?
Okay, let me hope I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Atina Sabra Sadiq, and I'm going to be a panelist for this round.
With that being said, Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Oh, okay, sorry for the delay. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexander, and I'll be the Prime Minister for this particular debate. So POIs, preferably in my 50 minutes, I would most likely take from closing so that we get some diagonal engagement. So starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, I think within the context of this particular debate, it is important to extend or to give you some clear context as to what exists within the world and as to why we as a government team would even take this particular action in ourselves. I think the first thing to understand is that when you see the way the world has moved over time, that it has become so liberal to the extent that individuals are so minute and so driven by different things that influence the way in which we necessarily engage with each other. What does this mean? Is that it has influenced the way in which we engage with our families, we can engage with we engage with our loved ones, the way in which we engage with so many people all around us. These liberal ideas means that it influence the way in which we do things like one, have sexual relationships, but even have love relationships in themselves, which has made it harder for us to have any form of fidel relationship. Notice that what existed before now, or within before the status quo that we have presently, is that high traditional ideals that used to be subscribed in different parts of the world meant that it kept families in check, and it meant that even though that you didn't need to do things like DNA paternity test, all those kind of things meant that you could necessarily have that level of trust, and you could never have that idea. But the fact that these particular narratives exist around us that have made us so liberal in sexuality and the way in which we interact with each other, it means that infidelity in itself has become something that has been skyrocketing in different parts of the world, especially in France within the context of this particular debate. We think that's a big problem, and repealing this ban gives justice to that in itself. Why is this context important? It's because one, there are so many liberal narratives that already exist within status quo, and individuals are subject to this particular changes. The way in which you look at yourself, when we think that so many relationships are based on sexual gratification to the point where if individuals are not necessarily satisfied with their partner, they are most likely going to do things like one, subscribe to other individuals for those sexual gratification. But secondly, that this narrative in itself is one that is necessarily going to like scar men within marital relationships who necessarily think that they are tied to their children, that their most forms of actualization is in their children. And so when you deny them that information to necessarily be able to checkmate the accountability that is necessary for them to be happy within that particular relationship, we think you are doing a huge service to those particular relationships in themselves. At the end of the day, what is this debate primarily about? Is that one, is how it impacts the family build-ups within this particular debate, which is going to most likely be a clash that exists. But secondly, like in how it impacts the most important stakeholders, especially when it comes to men and women in this particular debate, and how you are most likely to safeguard that relationship is as a whole. In terms of modeling, right? What do we think we are going to do, and how do we repeal this ban? We think that in clarity, this ban has already existed. We think that this ban already exists within France and it already exists within status quo. What we're going to do in terms of necessarily repealing this ban is that we remove it from parliament. Nobody necessarily has to subscribe to it. This information is something that every man or every individual within this particular marriage can go and seek for this particular paternity information to know if this particular child is theirs or not. We think these things are very, very important because we think that is the way in which you essentially to justify this particular move. In terms of justification, I think the reason why this particular idea of repealing this ban is a justified move for any government to take, one, is because you have an obligation to necessarily, one, safeguard the way in which individuals interact within their marriages. Why is this true? Notice that the biggest push you're going to get from opposition is that one, the fact that this information doesn't exist means that you're necessarily going to be able to safeguard that relationship in itself. But here, that's why here this is why that is just an assertion. It's an assertion because a lot of individuals don't necessarily have the full persona or the full facade of whether your partner is being trustworthy or not. They need that particular information. In a world where you don't give them that particular information, it means that they continue to distrust their particular partner, to discuss whether that partner is not, whether that child is theirs or not. They never get that information. Why is it better in our world? In our world, when you give them that particular information, it means you are able to really define a relationship from there on. Because at the end of the day, we have to both agree that the harms of whether that child is theirs or not still remains. The question then becomes, how do you necessarily are able to necessarily redefine that relationship to the point where you're able to have that relationship continuity, that marriage continuity? You get that in our side of the house because it means that individuals are necessarily going to that. At least at some point, there's a possibility where you have the ability to do things like one, move on from that particular relationship. But here's why it is bad on their own. It means that in that side of the house, you never get that continuity because you never even understand whether that child is yours. So you continue to live in uncertainty. You continue to have distrust of your spouse. You continue to have ways that do not favor, or you continue to have ways that are destructive relationships that are stemmed out of things like one, I don't even know if this particular person is lying to me or not. At least that information brings clarity, and that clarity is important for all relationships because it means that at least you have some level of assured continuity within that particular relationship. We think this is very, very important. But let's also talk about the narrative, right? Let's just have what we have in terms of far-right institutions in France is that it is highly traditional. It means that what I was explaining in France is that the way in which the far-right necessarily see this particular policy or this particular idea of this particular ban means that one, you confirm that the fact that liberalization or left policies are number one, want to necessarily do things like scatter the building block of society in itself, which is something that a lot of far-right individuals don't necessarily subscribe to. Yes, your POI.
You're contradicting yourself. In the first part of your speech, you said that there's a liberal wave, but you're correct. This is France, so this is right wing and conservative areas. Your argument about infidelity does not work.
Like, I don't understand what you mean by, like, the thing is, what exists within society is that you have highly liberal spaces, individuals engage in social media. These spaces are all very highly liberal. What exists within their political system, that you have a far right system that's opposing this particular bill in itself. I don't know if you want to go and argue with France themselves. I don't know what you want to necessarily argue within that particular idea. Please don't call that a contradiction. Please fix up that. Don't make that your case or your extension. Look, so the idea is that, number one, the way in which far right individuals look at this particular policy is that they see this policy as an affront to the dignity of these particular individuals within that particular marriage, as an affront to the point where you don't give them that particular clarity. Individuals need to be able to, number one, have accountability within marriages, as which these individuals see as a stumbling block or the building block for which all relationships exist within society. In the point where that particular ban exists, it removes that accountability and means that you are able to confirm the biases of these particular individuals and have these particular policies become a big problem within society. Second thing is why you don't get those particular side impacts from opposition as to why families are going to be broken down. We think it is principally wrong to necessarily do things like deny individuals of the kind of information that can be very crucial to the building of that particular relationship in themselves. Given that so many things influence the way in which individuals interact within society, it is safe for any man to feel or any individual to feel like their partner is necessarily not being accountable or not being true enough within a relationship. It then means that instead of necessarily giving a situation where you provide clarity, it's a situation where you give them to continue to live in uncertainty. It's a situation where you continue to make them that they're not sure of what they're necessarily doing in that particular relationship. The kind of actions that are going to take in that kind of relationship and means actions that are necessarily going to create the amount of responsibility that you want to take in that particular relationship, because they don't see the need to be in that particular relationship. They are uncertain, they are unsure, they don't know what the truth is, they don't have that level of clarity. In the outside of the house, the impact of this is that, one, it makes it harder for you to safeguard that relationship in itself, but two, it denies you any information that could have otherwise be so crucial to the stakeholders of that family, or at least allow that family to continuously grow. Panel, in our side of the house, we're able to safeguard the building block of relationship that continues society in itself and makes us be able to do things that necessarily safeguard families. We think it's the best things for you to do within society, proud to come from opening governments.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for that speech. We call upon Leader of Opposition to state the case for OO. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Loke Ganiat. I'll be the leader of opposition for this round. Very glad to be debating here, and cheers to our panelists and judges for listening to almost 48 minutes of speeches. Cheers to my partner too. Yes, starting from my next word. As a society, we started off from making sure whether women are virgins, to moving on to whether or not you can do things like abortion, to moving on to whether your ability to cook, to now moving on to saying, is that child even mine in the first place? These are several levels in which society has gone to consecutively harm down on human rights and morality at every stance. As leader of opposition and as a woman, I strongly stand against this motion to most likely repeal this law. I think the first thing to most likely understand is what this ban looks like in the first place. And I don't think we got that primarily from Prime Minister, and it will be too late before DPM tries to do that. So most likely, individuals can't just walk up into a hospital and say, hey, I want to get a paternity test for this child and bring a child to the hospital on a random Thursday when the child is supposed to be in school. So what this means is there are still things like legal system that can still be around you to get most likely paternity in the worst case scenario, in which probably for criminal justice system for the purpose of verification in terms of crimes, I think we can do that where CGS has that right. But as an individual, as a parent, we think it's morally and principally unjustified for you to just say you want a paternity test. And to very much understand how this law works, it has been passed in no less than a year. I think it is very ridiculous in the eye of France for them to most likely say we want to repeal a law that we just passed in less than a year, given the most people most likely calling out are people like males and men in the society constantly validating the fact that women can't speak up at the end of the day. I think a couple of things to make sure OG. Number one, they prioritize men, and that was very clear within their speech on how they say, oh, we have to have accountability. They're saying men. They have to have trustworthy partners. They're saying women are bad partners. They have to have liberalism. I don't see how liberalism goes into that context, given that literally France is a more conservative society. But even if you engage the idea of liberalism, I don't think the idea of paternity test fits well into that. When it comes to the idea of accountability, CGN, in the worst case, when it comes to criminal activities, can't do that. I don't think any individual at that particular time, given this is made that this is most likely or is unnecessary. A couple of things, 5 things within my speech. Number one, what necessitated the ban in the first place. The second thing is how this how the characterization of France has a high instability of family structure. The third thing is on the principle of social contract that will exist. The fourth thing is on how this always puts women in a spot of validation from society, and now moving on to children. The fourth thing is on how this is an inconsistent, makes government saying they have inconsistent policy. The last thing on who the state should prioritize in terms of the interest of whether men, women, / children. The first thing then on the idea of validation of men, of women and children within the society. So it started from the idea of saying whether or not your ability as a woman to most likely produce or have a child, or being a barren woman, now to saying you most likely have to most likely, say, oh, this child your own at the end of the day. I think at this point, you're not even shifting from the women. I'll take you soon. I think at the end of the day, we're not shifting from the women and say, oh, we also have to validate if this child is actually mine. I don't think it's very much understanding for us to understand that as a man, you just don't wake up one day and say, hey, primarily, I just want to check if this child is mine at the end of the day. Opening government themselves constitute the fact that the relationship would exist. I don't see how you want a relationship to continue after you know that this child isn't mine. I mean, it's very logical for you to understand that this most likely means a trampled on effect on seeing marriages no longer work. And I think to a very large extent on how I characterize France as a country that most likely has unstable family structures, at the end of the day, most likely means you'll have more families going down. I think the idea of social contract is very easy. Government has an obligation to citizens. These citizens make up families and make up marriages and make up relationships, all those sort of things. This family producing like children that will make up the future world. This automatically means at the point where you validate, I'll take you soon, 5 minutes. At the point in which where you validate or invalidate children, it most likely means you most likely have a mental impact on children. At the end of the day, we have an upcoming generation that we're also pushing down the cycle of saying we have to validate every single thing, even your identity or whether or not you are mine or all those sort of things. I think the second thing, the third thing, the idea of consistent policy. This policy was literally passed in less than a year. And the analysis here is very simple. It's not because women are saying we are complaining. It's still the men that are complaining that want to say we want to have paternity tests to a very large extent. The fact that OG now thinks that every single, like the analysis that OG is now trying to paint is most likely a large number of women within that society now engage in things like unhealthy or saying they're cheating on their partner, those sort of things. I don't think that's the framing or analysis that we want to buy from them. So due to call out and backlash is most likely the thing that and from primarily men are things that would make them want to repeal it or want to even support this in person. I think for the validation of children and women, that is not a wording which you want. But from closing 3 to closing government, 3 opening government.
Say your debate cannot be, oh, this particular thing invalidates women. The idea is men most likely confer with their wives before they necessarily take this paternity test. Why then should we deny this particular information? We're not saying engaging.
How a high level of instability marriages automatically mean the coming generation most likely have a large level of mental health. I mean, I don't see how a child will be happy knowing that their parent is going to get a divorce from the fact that somebody validated whether or not I'm their child. I think to a very large extent, if I end up like being with one of them, I'll always be a reminder that the reason why I'm no longer my parents is because somebody validated whether I'm their child or not. That is the word that we do which you want for children. I think this even links back so on whose interest the state should prioritize at every exit. I think even when things like what happens, they always say, hey, children should be prioritized, given that people that most likely make up their upcoming generation. They face the most likely proximate harm of this in terms of probably even in school or going to schools and their peers even saying, hey, you're not even the child of your father or all those sort of things. These are huge things that even make up for us in terms of how conservative they are, even regardless of how they engage in liberalist view, all those sort of things. As long as your right doesn't trample upon the idea and generation of the generation of millions to come, I think it's very much understandable or very much justified on moral and principle ground for us to not repeal this law. The last impact, and which is the most important panel, is the multiplying effect that this will have. So if opening government, even in the worst case, want to say, oh, it's only a few people that will do this, which I think is a lie. I mean, if I see a guy saying, oh, I also want to go and validate this child, another man will do it. It is less likelihood that a woman will want to do it, so it most likely means that separatism men in their would prioritize the healthy living of these children, the mental health of these children, and also for society to stop validating every step of woman that they most likely take. We already showed how things like paternity tests in the worst case where it is most likely necessary, CJN has access to that. At the point where a father can just walk up one day and say, I want to take my child for paternity test and keep on encouraging every other man out there to most likely carry out these actions. That is the word in which you know prioritize. Panel principle versus morality in a very strong way. We're going to justify on several level of analysis on how social contract and validation of women and children and ecosystem of government policy should be prioritized in this debate as opposed to saying we want men to always be the one to say what we want or not. Proud to come from opening the position.
Thank you so much, Leader of Opposition. We call upon the Deputy Prime Minister to close the case for opening government. Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So please, I would just beg that you give me, I think, a minute to switch devices, because I don't 100% trust this device to be as effective. I don't know if it might die anytime soon, but just give me a couple of minutes, please. I'm coming. All right, am I audible? Guys, am I audible, please?
Yeah, audible.
All right, so I would, if you have a POI, just unmute and say your team name, and then what else? Yeah, I think that should be it. If at any point in time I cut off, just please pause my time and tell my partner to call my alternative line. He has my alternative line, so in case I go off, just tell him to call my alternative line. I'm going to see a call, and then I'll be aware immediately. All right, so I begin in 3, 2, 1. I think the first thing we need to note is that we need to make a couple of concessions, but also additionally, we need to, as much as possible, interrogate what France looks like. I think there was a very big misunderstanding from closing opposition when they asked that POI. We say that it's a liberal society in France, but there has been a rise in the far right. People like Marine Le Pen, for instance, her party getting a lot of nominations in the French Congress. And with, of course, a rise, I think there was recently like a prime minister from a party that was elected or something of the sorts. There's also that pushback. We think one of the things we need to do is that we need to engage that particular context by taking back the way in which they have framed this ban. Because the way the far right movement has framed the ban is that, this is against your rights as men, that, this is just the incursion of liberal ideas to your spaces and taking away your rights. The same way you see people like Donald Trump talking about gun rights, etc. We think what we primarily do on our side, as an extension in my speech, and this was alluded to from Prime Minister, so no one can say it's backloading, is that we are able to reframe it. I'll get to that in a bit. I just want to engage open opposition. I think they kind of use this emotional like aspect of their speech that says, oh, women are going to be affected. I am a lady, so listen to me. I think that was very weird. Analysis has to follow with that regard. I think what happens mostly, even if it is like everybody, which makes no sense, that every single man is going to do this. What happens is that these are for people that are suspicious, which means you probably are white, your wife is white, and you have a black child. So you probably like, what the hell is happening here? You want to check it out and see what's happening. What happens in their side when this ban is still in place is that there will still be that doubt. There will still be that suspicion. There will still be that internal rumbling and distrust existing on their side. It means on us, at least you can confirm that and have that peace of mind, and even are able to move that relationship if you want to stay, if you want to leave. As long as you have complete information that is justified to make the choice off of that regard. What happens on their side is people still distrust their wives, people still distrust their partners, even based off the fact that they are not yet certain. That is unjustified in that regard. Secondly, is that when these suspicions continuously compound, especially when it is glaring, you probably have no incentive to keep or remain within that relationship, or probably to like support them or to be as loving as you probably would. Because like there's no way for you to confirm those suspicions. At least on our side, there is a way to end that relationship even amicably, probably settle and like move on. Comparatively, there's still more harm on your side because the fact that you still continuously put those women in those positions where even the women cannot confirm that, truly this is your child. Because even the woman who is put in that position of suspicion cannot go to the doctor and say, I want to have this child tested, because she cannot disprove like the fact that these allegations or these suspicions exist against her. Your side still harms the women more, because these suspicions will still exist, especially with the kind of characterization that my partner gives you, where infidelity is on the rise, particularly in these kinds of spaces, right? I think this is very, very important. On the justification for the ban, like they said, it just happened a year ago. I really don't know and I don't care. But the fact is this: what happened what happens in this kind of context is that we have like prenups, we have divorce like prenups that people kind of sign in terms like in case like the marriage ends, right? People are in a way need to safeguard themselves in case of like some kind of issues in marriage, like maybe the child isn't yours, maybe someone does something to hurt you. We think it is principally consistent to have something like this exist in such a climb where prenups exist. Like, I mean, you cannot just argue like an up and say that, oh, this is going to harm the family structure, etc, etc. Women are going to be distrusted, when this is in line with safeguarding all parties. The difference, though, is on their side is the fact that there is now a shift towards saying that, oh, because women need to be protected, we just only safeguard like probably only women, and we don't give like equal ability to safeguard yourself in relationships. I think that's problematic. But on our side, another thing that happens when people are aware that this ban no longer exists, there is no incentive for you to be like for you to engage in infidelity. There's now a disincentive for you to engage in all those things, which actually better like improves the marriage system and better improves trust. But secondly or thirdly, people become more aware that there's a possibility that maybe my man will probably get like a paternity test or something like that. So there's less of incentive to actually go to like be like promiscuous and all that. But it's important too, because something my partner tells you is that in most instances, it is not in every instance, but I think in most instances, when this becomes like clear, it's almost going to be like that kind of prenup like arrangement. Oh, you kind of know and consent to the fact that this is a possibility. This is probably going to happen. So even as a woman, you probably are still like aware that this is going to happen, and you still probably like consent to that being existing, like things like prenup and all these things that safeguard people in marriages. I'll take a point now before I proceed to the last thing I want to say.
Analysis on engaging the validation of just no women and children can't suffice, given we already showed.
Yeah, no, the thing is that comparatively on your side, people still suspect, people still don't like love those child as much, or those children as much, because they're still suspicious of the fact that those children are not theirs. On our side, at least they can say, oh, it's not the child's fault, it's the woman's fault. So they can still love that child, even though they know the child isn't theirs. On your side, it's still suspicion. They hate both the child, they hate the woman as well. On the political aspect of this, I think the way in which far right groups manipulate this is to say that, look at this ban. Men, like, they are against you, right? Oh, they're taking away some of your rights. Oh, they are like trying to like push forward liberalism down your throat. We think on our side, when we can do it now and do it like speedily, is that we take back the control of these narratives. We can say, oh, because the thing is, when you put forth policies, you don't just put forth policies, you control the framing of how those policies are perceived by saying, we're doing this to as much as possible give everyone within the marriage system equality, to be able to like ensure that everyone can safeguard themselves. Because I mean, in the status quo, men pay most of like their alimony. Men probably pay a lot when like divorce happens. Like, they can frame it to be like, oh, we're trying to create this balance, and two, oh, we care about the family structure, right? But the way the far right frames it, and by the way, if they end up like putting these things in law themselves, probably in like a near future where Marine Le Pen probably wins, I don't know, there's probably going to be more control of that framing. You need to get back that control of the framing and get back the control of how people perceive this particular policy. This is impactful, one, because you have more buying, not just from people that would probably have been used or weaponized like in the far right, but you also have buying of people that probably are in the center that don't trust most of like these liberal governments, or don't trust most of those people in power, like Macron and all those particular kind of things. We think this is particularly important because what happens with the femicide, all those things that happens, it worsens on their side when men have now a justification, because they cannot confirm that this child is like truly theirs. They probably still believe in the lie or the narrative that women are promiscuous, and they cannot confirm that the women themselves cannot prove that there is like something that probably like not like promiscuous, etc, etc. What should be remembered in this debate is this: that on our side, we provide certainty to both the man and the woman, but also safeguard people within marriages. This is consistent to certain structures that exist, like prenups, like all these particular kind of agreements. But thirdly, we also take back control of the framing in which it will probably happen if we leave it to far right groups to frame. We are proud to propose.
Thank you so much, GP, and we call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition to end the case for OO and ultimately the opening half. Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Sorry,
Just give me.
sorry, Muideen, can you quickly check your chat space?
All right,
Your
just give me a few seconds to set up my time. Okay, so please, if you have POI, don't unmute. You can just type it in the chat space. I'm going to take you. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, there's a bit of inconsistency in the case that you get from opening governments. First, PM tells you that relationship is built on trust, which means that partners have to trust each other regardless of the circumstances. What you get from DPM is that there is curiosity, there is distrust. People don't trust their partner. People are suspicious and all those sort of things. I don't think that bit of inconsistency is something that is good. But let's take it at their best. Let's engage PM. We think that marriage in most certain instances is built on trust. That is why you have things like unconditional love. That is why people grow together. Because notice that it's not that they don't make mistakes, but they overlook those mistakes. It's because they don't ask questions and a lot of things. You just overlook it because you love your partner. That is what makes marriage sustainable in the future. But let's engage them. The first idea you get is that, oh, there is doubt in our world, there is no doubt in their world. The problem when you make ban readily available, when you make paternity test readily available, is that not only people that are suspicious will be doing it. There's a trickle-down effect. When people are doing something, it means that people that are not even suspicious started getting suspicious because more and more awareness are in status quo that, oh, there are certain people that find out 15 years later that their kids have no their own. It means that there is a shift in narrative that, oh, this thing is rampant. It means that people that don't even have a reason to get suspicious of their partner are likely going to do. We think that what that means is that it is likely going to break down family. Because notice how family is built on trust. It means as an husband or wife, let's engage their best case scenario. Let's engage a world where at the end of the day, you conduct paternity tests and you find out that the child is your own. What happens to your wife then? Given the fact that you already sent the narrative that, oh, I don't trust you enough, I think you are promiscuous and all those sort of things, it's likely not going to love you either, which means that even if that marriage is sustained in your world, it is devoid of love. We don't think that that is the kind of marriage that we want in status quo. But let's engage the best case scenario, because they said, oh, if the child is not your own, you can just say, oh, I'll just take it like that. We don't think that that's reality. The vast majority of individuals in status quo are likely going to break down because of the shock that the person that they've been catering for 15 years is not their own. We think that emotional breakdown is something that is unfair, is something that is bad. But also notice how it becomes problematic for them going into the future. It means that they started getting suspicious of their future partner. Even if at the end of the day, they decided to get another family, it becomes more and more problematic. That kind of word is one that is extremely problematic. But let's engage the nature of the ban, because what you get from a partner is simple. When ban is placed in status quo, it does not mean that outrightly anything that has to do with paternity test is forbidden, right? Especially in places like France, that is not the reality of status quo. What the ban look like, for instance, even things like drug, when there is a ban on drug, it doesn't mean that doctors cannot prescribe those drugs. It only means that it has to be on heavy supervision. They have to take a lot of things into consideration. This is consistent with the same principle of banning paternity tests. When it is legal, when you go to court, maybe you are fighting for inheritance or custody of child and all those sort of things, it is still allowed in France that paternity tests be used as an evidence in order to make decisions in those instances. We think that if you are extremely unsure, you can go to legal. I told you, reject. You can go legal way. We think that that is something that is crucial. Notice that the major stakeholders in today's debate cannot be about the father alone, because notice that the children are also important. Because what this guy said is, oh, it's the right wing that are propagating for the right and that are propagating for the right of father and all those sort of things. We think even if the right of father is something that is crucial, we also have to take note of children, because notice that at the end of the day, they are the ones that are likely going to be affected by the impact of these things. But notice how it is not their fault. It is not their fault that their parents or that their father or their wife decided to marry. It is not their fault that their mom is promiscuous and all those sort of things. But what you do the moment where you get the truth, that you devoid them of that fatherly love, and we think that this is something that is problematic. The trigger and analysis is what my partner tell you about how there's a backlash that is targeted towards those children. We think that this ultimately affects them psychologically, and when they grow up into the future, it continue to affect them. We think that that is something that is bad. Notice that how best are we able to preserve the continuity of family? Because that is the clash. They said, oh, there is suspicious, there is no trust. We want to preserve the continuity of family. We think in our world, we are best able to preserve it because at least, even if you are suspicious, you don't do anything, you continue to love. And the most ridiculous thing that you get from DPM is that, oh, when people are suspicious in our world, their reaction is towards both the mother and the child. But when they are certain that the child is not their own in their world, then they started doing good towards the child and say, oh, it's the fault of your mother, it's not the fault of the child. We think that that is something that makes no sense. If that is true, then it also means it is true in our world that even if you are uncertain, you are only uncertain towards the parent, you can still continue to show that fatherly love to the children. It means that in our world, given the fact that we've already proven to you that relationship should be built on trust, we think that that trust is something that is crucial in order to maintain the level of unconditional love that people currently enjoy in status quo. The moment where you started asking around about the authenticity of your child in that world, you lose that unconditional love. Family no longer makes sense. We don't think that that is good. Your POI CG.
Basically, you have to understand that reconciliation only exists at a point where we know for certain that so and so thing is true. Your word removes that prospect of reconciliation because we don't know what exactly is true or not true.
That makes no sense. What we prove uniquely from OG is that there is a narrative. It's not only about people that are suspicious. If it's about them, the numbers are minute. Notice how there is a shift in narrative. People that are not even suspicious started getting suspicious. We don't think for that, like for few people that are suspicious of their children. If you want to argue things like we've already proven to you how there's an alternative, you can always go to court and all those sort of things. Ban do not affect those kind of scenarios. But notice that the vast majority of stable family that we currently have in France are likely going to be affected because of the narrative, because of constant discovery of, oh, this family is breakdown because their child that they've been taking care of for 5 years is not their own. It means that every husband started getting suspicious of their partner. It's not about three individuals that are suspicious. It's about the likelihood of thousands and thousands of people getting suspicious. It is not easy to take care of a child for years and getting to know that, oh, this child is not your own. But the moment where there is no narrative in status quo, everyone continue to love their children, even if there is certain even if there is certain suspicion among few family. We think that that is something that is still better compared to the number of instability that we are likely going to get the moment where this becomes a norm. And you cannot prove that, oh, it is not going to become a norm. When you constantly hear in radio about how someone do a paternity and the child is not your own, you started getting more suspicious. You want to confirm. That is what you should argue, and that is the debate. For that very reason, proudly DPM.
Thank you so much, Diallo. We now call upon the member of government to start the case for the closing of. Yeah.
Hey there. Before I start, I'd like to shout out to my partner. Allow me to set up my timer and before I begin. Okay, I start in 3, 2, and 1. So yeah, panel for government benches to win this debate, or for any side of this for any bench to win this debate, they have to demonstrate how their approach to the ban maximizes overall societal well-being. For government for opposition benches to win this debate, they have to show us how they are balancing individual rights and family cohesion and the welfare of the children, which is what I intend to do from CG. Panel, understand that we agree with what OO says, that paternities are still accessible but comes at a legal expense. Now we have to understand that individuals from less privileged backgrounds may be disappropriate are going to be affected by the current ban as they might not have the financial or legal resources to pursue a court order paternity test. Repealing the ban makes it's easier to access these tests, and repealing the ban makes it possible to access these tests, and hence regardless of your socio-economic status. You also have to understand that, but the truth is, it extends to giving other because with the current ban, it allows for the perpetuations of falsehood where certain individuals may intentionally or unintentionally mislead others regarding parentage. Repealing the ban will make it easier for individuals to confirm paternity and hold each other accountable for the truth, which is what the POI we raise, and we'll show you how we answer the question on how we are able to improve a case of reconciliation on our side of the house. Understand like cases on inheritance. By allowing paternity tests, legal disputes over inheritance or parental rights can be swiftly resolved based on biological facts. Now, this reduces the burden on the courts and the legal system, it's happening in status quo. You have to go through the court, you have to go through the legal system for these cases to be solved, which wastes a lot of time, both the court's time and the victim's time and money and resources. On our side of the house, we make sure that these legal systems or these decisions are faster and more straightforward. So on our side of the house, we ensure a fairer society where legal and social obligations are clearly tied or to biological factors. Very important. OO brings to the debate about trust and unconditional love. I believe that when you do not know the parentage of your child, or when you doubting the parentage child, whatever of your child, it comes to a point where you are socially stigmatized. Biological parentage is not the whole determinant, is not the sole determinant of the family legitimacy. When these tests are restricted, societal expectations about biological ties tend to dominate our family structures. Hence, repealing the ban will normalize the open exploration of family makeup, challenging the traditional norms and reducing the the bans that have been there for the taboos that have been operating for a long time. Hence, families are going to conform to biological standards. It will foster broader acceptance of non-traditional families and structures, including subfamilies and families formed through adoption or assisted reproduction. We feel like this on our side of the house, this reconciliation is far much better, because now you know the child, your father loves you because he loves you, not generally because you're his biological child. You're at least able to understand where this kind of trust and unconditional love is coming from. Yeah. The present legal barriers make it hard to explore the taboos around parentage. People and society as a whole agree that biological fathers is not always the most important parental figure. We have your family dynamics, because we agree family is complex and does not always have to conform to biological standards. This way, the impact in all of this, what you get from CG is that we dismantle traditional societal expectation and we are able to move to a more acceptable and leftist society. Yeah. Something else what we reduce on the side of CG is domestic violence. Understand that unresolved suspicions about paternity can lead to tension and conflict in relationship. Once you start seeing that your neighbor's child suspiciously looks like your husband, then we're going to have a place where we're continually questioning the paternity's partner's fidelity and loyalty. You know, OG makes it. Okay, CG. Tries to make this debate look like women are the ones who are infidels. Well, we forget that men can also be are also infidels and also unloyal. So whatever we're going to have in society is situations where women or men or partners as a whole are going to continually use paternity doubts as a means of controlling or emotionally in manipulating your partner. Now understand this, picture this: your child, your sister's child suspiciously looks like your husband. How does that family dynamic look like? It looks like you continually manipulating your husband over this, or your partner continually manipulating you over the fact that your child suspiciously looks like their brother or something like that. The lack of legal access to paternity tests can exacerbate this power dynamics, and the only way to break these power dynamics is by repealing this law and allowing this issue to take away the power of manipulation from people. What we end up with from CG is significantly reducing or having healthier families. We also indicated that children are the most important people in this debate. Now, understand what do we get when you do not confirm your parentage or your biological parentage. Biological parentage panel is very crucial for accurate medical histories and genetic risk assessments. Once you do not know your genetic genetic risks or whatever risks you're facing as a person, it is highly risky and inherently dangerous to continue living like that, because you do not know what kind of lifestyles you are supposed to conform to, because genetic diseases like hereditary cancers and cardiovascular disorders rely on family history to assess the risk. Now, at a point in time where you do not know your correct biological parentage, you are at a risk, and you are most likely going to succumb to cardiovascular disorders. It's out of order. If paternity is unclear, individuals may have incomplete or incorrect medical histories. Repealing this ban will allow for families to confirm their biological ties, hence providing more accurate information for medical professions or to assess the genetic risks. We also believe that out of this, it stifles the ban or the cost of the discourse in society, because now you no longer have the risk, you no longer have the joy or the freedom to talk about traditional societal expectations. Proud CG.
Thank you so much, member of GAV, for that fine speech. Call upon member of opposition to start the case for CO. Oh, yeah.
Hi. Just to confirm if I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible.
Thank you. POI is through chat. Again, POI is through chat. Please don't open your mic. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. There are two responses to call closing government. The first thing that they say that if you repeal the ban, it's going to be accessible. I think this is factually not true, because based on French courts, note that you still need to actually go to the court in order for you to have a divorce, in order for you to cut off your filiality towards their children. So that means this is symmetric. The second thing that they say is in terms of health issues, note that French court allows actually to be an exception in terms of medical or health issues. So that means it's also symmetric. I think they never able to prove any exclusivity. I think at best they're just rehash coming from opening government in terms of reconciliation. Next thing that I'll do is, I think opening opposition is correct on arguing that it basically breeds families and breaks families apart. But there are two missing analysis coming from opening opposition. The first thing is characterization of France, because they cannot get their impacts if they're able to frame what France is and how they would actually respond to at the point at which you're going to repeal the ban. But secondly, I think they never weigh the material on why this is the most important thing in relation to the argument coming from opening government in terms of reconciliation or in terms of taking the quote-unquote narrative against the right-wing individuals. So we're going to prove that breaking families is the most important thing that you should consider within this debate. First thing then that is missing coming from opening opposition, what is the characterization of France that exists in status quo? I want to note that opening government is correct, and that's why they contradict themselves. Contradiction coming from opening government is to say that because of social media and liberal push, there's already a rise in infidelity. But at the same time, they also say that a lot of demographics that exist in French or in France are actually conservative individuals. And the reason why this is true is because their whole leader is actually a right-wing individual, which is Macron, who is able to actually engage in draconian policies and even able to have control the media at the end of the day. So this means their impact about, infidelity rising is not the case. More likely then, France is heavily patriarchal because of the conservative nature. But more than that, because of that, that means their concept of family is very rigid. Their concept of family is only strict towards to their bloodlines. I.e., if you're not in my bloodline, I'm not going to actually consider you as a family. And we say this is a Pandora's box that they're going to open on their side. Second thing then that I'm going to do, how will the paternity test actually exist at the point at which it's repealed? Note that usually paternity test is going to be engaged by the fathers because you need father's consent for you to have paternity test. And I think this is bad because once the repeal is done, right-wing individuals, influencers, and politicians are going to convince other men to opt into this type of approach that they need to engage on securing paternal tests. Opening oppositions only asserts this. Closing opposition proves the likelihood on why this will happen. The first thing is because of capitalistic incentive. Note that if you're going to allow paternity tests, that means you're going to increase market. So that means private sectors are going to enter here. And insofar private sectors are part of the elites, that means you have incentive to actually earn profit. That's why they're going to convince a lot of men to participate in this market. But secondly, I think as an influencer right wing, you want to have optics and engagements. Insofar the repeal is going to be a big issue in France. That means they want to capitalize the media. This is why it's going to be censored. It's going to be sensationalized at the point at which you're going to do this. I think this is bad because these individuals are going to attack your fears, are going to attack your insecurity by telling you in that advertisement in social media that your wife might be cheating on you. You need to do the paternity test. This is why opening government is wrong, because opening government's argument on reconciliation is contingent that the men are going to be transparent on
Clarity
their
from
wife. But
OG.
this is not the case. More likely, they're going to do this secretly because they want to go behind the backs and ensure whether or not they're actually the real father of that child. And this is where the impact happens. Opening opposition is correct that you're going to destroy the family, but I'm going to first weigh this, why this is an important thing, because opening opposition wasn't able to do this. I think for three things. One, by virtue of scale, because not only you're going to affect one family, you're going to affect multiple families at the point at which this is sensationalized. But two, the gravity of the impact that's going to happen, which I'm going to explain later. But the third thing is the irreversible harms that you're going to inflict, not only to the women, but also to the children and to their current generations at the end of the day. First impact then is that opening government and closing government says that there's going to be doubt. That's why if we have paternity tests, we need to have some solvency or some clarity. I think what they do on their side is they exacerbate and sensationalize doubt. And this is a bad thing because you create a culture of men or fathers doubting their wives at the end of the day. And that means this is a bad thing because once we frame that France is heavily patriarchal, that means you allow microaggressions against their wife. They're increasing the domestic abuse because individuals or fathers are going to act on their emotions, telling why are you actually cheating on me, etc. That's where the harm manifests because you're literally harming women. But the second thing is that men can now weaponize the paternity test to opt out of obligation. So if it is true that there is an illegitimate child that exists on both sides of the house, now fathers who are that father can specifically opt out to that specific obligation. And we say this is bad because even if you are an illegitimate children, why would you be deprived the right to actually have a good support, to have a good livelihood just because you are not the biological father or not just because you don't have the same bloodline? This is an arbitrary metric that they allow to open. We say on our side, even if you are illegitimate children, at least they don't have the ability to opt out to not support you or not to help you. At least these illegitimate children are protected on our side. But the third thing is that even on both sides, even if there's distrust, at least the father has no ability to divorce these women and these children because they're not going to be constantly engaged on this because it's unjust for you to, again, deprive them. The impact here is pretty simple. That means this is an irreversible harm that not only you're inflicting to the wife, but also to the children. Because now the father has the capacity to opt out, to walk away to that specific family. That means you allow that little children to don't have any father because of the doubt, or you make their family harder because now it's harder for the wife to be at the home to support their children, but also at the same time work because now the father is gone. But more than that, there's also going to be social stigma and social disruption against at the point at which this is going to happen, which creates traumatic experiences for the child and to that family at the end of the day. What did we prove to you coming from closing opposition? I think the first thing we prove is we strategically position our argument that this is more important than reclaiming the narrative from the right wing coming from OG. This also directly responds that it is not true that you're going to allow reconciliation just because the information is there, because of the emotional reactions and how these fathers or men are going to engage in precisely the fact that they have the ability because of the patriarchal narrative in France. We say repeal is such a bad thing because you're going to harm not only the father, but also those little guys out there. All of those reasons oppose.
Thank you so much, member of OP. We now call upon government whip to end the case for the government bench. Yeah.
Oh, great. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So yeah, I'll take POIs. I really don't know why the other speaker didn't take a POI, but it's all good. I would love POIs. Just say POI and I would signify when I want the POI. All right. Just a second. Hold on. Okay. Yeah. So starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel. So I believe the conversation we've had so far in today's debate, particularly from opposition side, has been one, particularly from CO, that can be summed up as saying that women, and in some utopia kind sort of world, children as well, are persons who stand to gain more than men. They've managed to make today's debate sort of a men versus women kind of narrative. However, we think that's just on the premise of scale, right? It just makes no sense, because considering the fact that government would now be seen to take side, even if we are to buy whatever you get from OO and CO. The implication of their argument is that it is okay for government to just take side and say, oh, this policy has to be one that supports one aspect of society, one gender over the other. We don't think that makes any sense, even just on scale, especially considering that government has to consider the interest of the rest of the individuals who exist in status quo. We think that's just basically on scale. I think government bench beats opposition on that premise. But first, in my whip speech, I'm going to be deconstructing a lot of things and making a lot of things clear so far. Firstly, OO says that the ban is just a year old. That's absolutely untrue. We think the ban on paternity test has been on since 1995 and has been validated by the courts in France a couple of years on, right? That's the situation of things. It's not like a year old, like they tell you in the first speech. Secondly, they say, oh, let's validate women, right? They want such a world where women are, for some reason, even though the mechanization of proving that isn't necessarily in their speech, a world where they sort of validate women over men. But panel, let's get a lot of things clear here. Firstly, they needed to do a whole lot of heavy lifting to prove that kids as well fall under their premise, because we can validly also say on our side that kids want closure. They want a world where they are certain of who their parents are or where their parentage comes from. We think it's something that we can still claim on our side. Opposition needed to do a whole lot of more heavy lifting to prove that. We don't think they did enough to do that. But then ultimately, we think in terms of stakeholders, they only sort of benefit women. Don't think that's something that would give them any sort of a win within today's debate. Let's take out CO finally, right? Because we think CO says that, okay, illegitimate children are protected in status quo in their world, right? They protect illegitimate children for some reason, and then that men can't divorce, and that this is somehow good for families. For panel, we don't think a family where a man wants to leave, like CO says, and is still compelled to stay, is a family that is good. We think this is just a ban on paternity tests, right? It's not a ban that says men or other persons in status in society can't do several other things. We think the implication of having that ban and what it actually causes are things that far outweigh the good or the benefit of having those men stay in those families and saying they cannot divorce because they would be because they are not the fathers
Go
of
on.
those children. We think the benefits are things that outweigh those the harms are things that outweigh that like weird benefit of having men staying in families that comes from what we are needed to be proved in today's debate. Let's talk about a lot of things. Firstly, there was the importance of a need to prove that the ban would lead to those problems of family disintegration, which is the premise of OO and O and CO, right? Because panel, we think their argument basically is to say that in a world where you repeal the ban, families become disintegrated. Let's talk about a bit of things under this. We think firstly, it goes without saying that in a world where you have a ban, like we've already brought into the debate that people still get access to these tests in society, right? People still find ways to do that. MD told you that. The impact of this is to see that when you have this ban, it means that people now are boldly more unfaithful. Infidelity is something that is giving a bigger like boldness, basically, because now there is a ban and these men cannot access these things in society because there's a ban, they don't have access to it. It's basically emboldens persons who are unfaithful. And we don't think people panel like the nuance is this. We don't think people who are unfaithful are persons who would want happy families. They are always going to cause several problems in their families. They don't give you that peace in families on their side when you have this ban, right? Because it basically happens, right? Especially when you now incentivize people to do more of cheating, because now you give them that sort of a blanket about like under which they can do whatever they want because you have a ban in status quo. I'll take a P right now.
Number one, extensions coming from WIP. Number two, your unique impact is not even much different from your opening. You can't just engage responsibly and say that is why you win. Give us your unique impact.
I don't know. Was that a judge? I don't know. It's not your place to see that there are extensions in my WIP speech. You are not a judge. That's your place. Panel, what were the new things that MG brought you into this debate? Firstly, we spoke about why it's important to dismantle traditional ideals about biological notions of family, and then more importantly, how repealing this the ban on DNA testing is something that is important for us to be able to do things like assess genetic risks and all of those illnesses that are directly tied to paternity DNA testing in France. We think, more importantly, it is very necessary for us to have a world that says that people can be able to assess these things validly without having that sort of ban in the first place. I'll ask a POI on the nature of reconciliation and why that's important. And I think a member of government already alluded to this, because the question then becomes, if we agree that infidelity would exist on either side, how then do we ensure that we move on from it? In what world do we give you the best impact as to the side that can be able to move on from having these things existing in families? Is it a world where you have a ban that says that people cannot even find out the nature of these things, or a world on our side that allows us to repeal that ban and be able to move on from it, right? Is it what world gives you that particular key level of benefit? We say it's on our side of the house, because reconciliation inherently cannot happen when both parties do not necessarily know all the facts. And that's what happens when you keep on having this ban in status quo. You are unable to actually know that this is the nature of what happens in status quo, or what each side actually brings to the table. I think removing this inherently gives us more closure in terms of reconciliation and promoting family integration. CG tells you why that people still carry out these tests. The cost of the ban effectively outweighs the benefits, and then the impacts and the necessity of reconciliation, especially considering also the need to dismantle traditional ideas about biological notions of family and how our side basically promotes that. We are very happy to propose.
Thank you so much, Gav. We could have one hope to conclude the debate. Yeah.
Hello, confirming if I'm loud and clear.
Yes, you are.
Cool, let me just set up my timer. Like, give me a minute. Speech, Ben, he, him, POIs, 4th to 5th, through voice. Just don't badger me, I'll take you, sure. Speech in 3, 2, 1. Opening government can keep creating paradoxes within their logic that they follow up with their case line, and closing government can try and insert as much as new matter as they can to save their case, and opening opposition can try and assert all of the impacts they can get, but closing opposition will win this debate. But firstly, let's try to weigh then what's happening within this debate. I think that the comparative that what other houses are doing here in this debate, specifically closing government and opening government, is that sure, they want the benefit of protecting and sustaining marriages or the family structures at the end of the day, which is why I don't get why their mechanism to achieve that is by opening a Pandora's box of mistrust, which eventually impacts not only the family, not only the father, the mother, but also the children on the ground. The discussion coming from member of opposition was able to successfully discuss and impact how this essentially affects women on the ground, how this affects the behavior of other people, corporations, and how this sets a collective behavior for men to keep distrusting women on the ground. But more importantly, the most important scope that member of opposition was able to discuss is how this affects children. I'm going to discuss later why this is the most proximate issue in this debate. But firstly, let's talk about the responses. Let's talk about the responses that we're going to launch then. Firstly, let's talk about opening government and extensively closing government because they're just a rehash. Let's talk about infidelity. I think that by virtue of the proportionality, I think that that the repelling of the ban of the paternitas actually holds women to the cross and holds them to a stake at to which you're only holding women accountable. There's no proportional way to hold men accountable. It's always just going to be women that you're putting on the stake. You're putting on the scope that they're likely going to set the narrative that, oh, women are wives are cheating. This is something that you don't get. You actually make it in-proportional. But secondly, they try to posit and justify it that it's essential in order for to hold people equally in the marriages accountable for the truth. But the problem with this then is that no, you're not really holding men accountable for opting out of the obligation just because they find out that the child is not theirs. You're actually enabling them to opt out of obligation, and it's only women that you put on the cross and you subject to more domestic violence at the end of the day. So no, you're not really protecting equal parties within the marriages, but extensively you're also harming the child. So you're harming two actors to protect one, but extensively. If it's true that the mistrust will exist in both worlds, then we'd rather not have a child be affected on how the mistrust will actually manifest. But lastly, let's engage then on the weird case coming from member of government, in which they tell you that the paternity test is actually essential in order to determine the quote-unquote medical history of a child because it's going to risk them at a later point in time. I want to note that this premise is not only weird, but it's also false because when babies are born, they're actually usually screened and tested if they're healthy or not. But extensively, if you want to find out if a baby has a genetic illness, I don't think that paternity test actually shows you that because it just shows you if the child is yours or not. But extensively, if you want to talk about genetics, you're not really going to find out who the father is because it just proves if the child is yours or not. But lastly, on the weird response coming from government, they tell you that it doesn't make sense for laws to lean towards one gender. Two things. One, that's how the harsh realities of society work in most patriarchal societies and conservative societies and societies, especially like France. But secondly,
Point.
it's specifically why I'll take that later, which is specifically why you also contradict yourself when you want to remove the ban to paternity testing, which men can use to weaponize and opt out of obligations easily just because they think that the child is not theirs. But before I my weighing, sure, POI.
Okay, so CEO's characterization of France as a patriarchal society is a gross lie, but also sensationalism happens on your side worse off because of the fact that in our side, people can at least leave these marriages. On your side, people still suspect. All right, still like frames it that, oh, this is like the government forcing these things down your throat, and people still commit femicide. That happens worse off on your side when that sensationalism happens when people are uncertain. At least people leave on our side. Your side doesn't offer them that.
I don't think the opt-out mechanisms are exclusive on your end. When in both worlds, divorce will still happen. Divorce will still be accessible. But the reason why the delta is better on our side is because the comparative then is that the mistrust does not manifest in order to affect children, which will harm their development at the end of the day. But let's weigh this then on three metrics. One, in which world do we best safeguard familiar structures? The comparative and the discussion coming from member of opposition was able to successfully discuss that most oftentimes these Pandora's boxes are reasons why families actually try to like break down or extensively, even if we buy the case of reconciliation, which probably is which by the way is logically flawed, because when to a point in time in which you put that mistrust there, you're unable to reconcile these things because you also put a rift on the relationship initially. This is something that you cannot get over, but extensively, the discussion from member of opposition tries to discuss on how this actually manifests when you put that distrust towards your certain partner. But second thing is, in which world do we safeguard children? And this is the most important discussion here in this debate, something that you exclusively get in closing opposition, because all of the benches within the round discuss how it affects the man and the woman. But extensively, we have to discuss how this affects children on the ground, children that have to feel the brunt of the relationship when in the work, the brunt of the relationship when in the first scenario, that's sure, we put on the paternity test and they're proven that they are the legitimate child. You still put a sense of distrust towards the child on that the possibility that their parents are probably cheating. This is an impact that will harm the child for generations, and will traumatize them for life. But secondly, in the occurrence, the child is proven to be illegitimate. What happens then to the child? the child is going to be subjected to to his or her own ideologies that they are a child born out of wedlock. They're a child born out of infidelity. This harms the child more in terms of the development, and this harms how they're able to interact with their parents, or this harms how they're able to interact with their parents, because there's now a set rift or gap between how they interact with parents because they're quote unquote an illegitimate child. But lastly, the most important impact, if we were able to pause it, is that you give men an easy opt-out mechanism when they feel like or they prove that the child is not theirs, which irregardless of outcome proves that there's no whether a child is illegitimate or not, any child deserves to be cared for and has deserved the equal support that a normal child does have. This is by virtue a fundamental right they should have access. When you repeal the ban on paternity access, this is a child which you incapacitate them to actually achieve. All of those reasons, CEO.
Thank you so much, guys, for the wonderful debate. Wishing you the best of luck in your next rounds. Congratulations to those who win. Judges, deliberation room.